Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, the channel where we go through the good and bad of everything nerdy to make sure you spend your time on the best of the best. In today's video, we'll be talking about the top 10 best deck building games you should play, so let's get into it. Alright, so a couple things before we jump into the video and the top 10 is that these games are not in any particular order, mostly because they're all great games, and they also cover different aspects of deck building, and a lot of them have different themes as well. So some people might enjoy other themes more than some, and they all feature various different deck building mechanics, but when it comes down to it, they're all great games. And again, this is just my personal opinion on the top 10 best deck building games, and there's a ton of them out there, so I might not have played yours, but definitely let me know in the comments below if there's deck building games I should check out that didn't make this list. But with that said, let's jump into it. So the first game on the list is Clank, a deck building adventure. So in this game, you play as a bunch of different thieves that are sneaking into Dragon Keep to find treasure and precious artifacts. And so players compete against each other, moving through the dungeon, and you have the opportunity to steal the most valuable artifact before other players do. But at the same time, there's a lot of variety in the game where you start off with a base deck that will allow you to move throughout the dungeon and acquire skill to buy better cards to further enhance your abilities. And so what I really like about this game is the fact that there's all kinds of different strategies you can use to win. The underlying strategy is that you want the most points at the end of the game, but to do this, you need to purchase cards that are worth points, you need to find the most treasure, but also make it out alive from the dungeon. And so there's kind of two layers to the dungeon. One is called the depths as you get further down, and what happens is if you happen to die in the depths, you basically earn nothing. But if you make it out alive above the depths and happen to die, you get the treasure you've collected on your adventure, but if you do go in, get an artifact, and make it all the way out, you get even more bonus points for surviving. And so what's cool is as you go throughout the dungeon, you'll make noise or clank, and every now and then there's a dragon attack which has the potential to wipe out all the characters, and the louder you've been or more clank that you've caused, the more likely you're going to get damaged from this dragon attack. And so it's really a fine balance of moving through the dungeon quickly, getting the most valuable artifacts, trying to make the least amount of noise, while also sabotaging other players, causing them to make more clank and potentially die throughout the dungeon. So it's a lot of fun. You can play 2 to 4 players, and I definitely recommend it. Now this game is also more of a fantasy-based deck building game, but if you like this style of gameplay, there's also a Clank in Space, which is also a ton of fun. Again, just has more of that sci-fi theme. The rules are a little bit different, but if you like this game, I think you'll also like Clank in Space, and it just kind of comes down to a personal preference whether you like that fantasy-based theme or more of a sci-fi theme on which game you go with. Both are great, and I definitely recommend them. And if you want to pick up a copy of this game, there'll be a link in the description below where you can do so. Alright, the next game on the list is Duffers, a golf-inspired deck building game. And so a lot of deck building games out there are either, like I said, fantasy-based or sci-fi-based. They're kind of combined with dungeon crawlers, or maybe they're taking place in medieval times and you're building a kingdom. A lot of similar themes like that, but Duffers is pretty cool where again it takes golf as its base theme. And so players start off, they're trying to complete various different holes on the course, and they have a starting deck that consists of various different clubs as well as a couple duffs, which are bad things that happen as you play. And so what's cool about this game is that you can either use your clubs for credits to buy better equipment to enhance your deck, purchasing new clubs, getting more equipment, hiring golf pros, different things like that, or you can use your clubs to try and complete holes and use them for yardage. And so as you initially set up the game, you'll pick anywhere from 6 to 9 holes you want to complete, and there's a variety of different holes to choose from as well. So there's more beginner holes and more advanced holes, and you can mix and match depending on the length of the game and the challenge you want to have. And so I really enjoy this game because again it combines that golf element, but there's also a lot of strategy involved as well, because if you happen to be the first player to complete a hole, you get a bonus card, which is usually a piece of better equipment that could greatly enhance your deck. Also, something that's pretty neat is that all players are competing against each other to complete all the holes as quickly as possible. Because what happens is once someone completes all of the holes, each player basically has one more round to complete any holes they have left. And if you don't complete a hole, you earn points double the par of the hole. So it can be pretty risky if you don't finish all of the holes, by the end of the game. And again, the win goes to the player that has the lowest score, just like regular golf. But like I said, there's a lot of strategic elements to the game as well, where you can complete multiple holes in a turn. So maybe you wait till later on in the game and build up an awesome deck and complete a bunch of holes under par, or maybe you try and do them quickly to knock other players out of the game, leaving them with holes unfinished and a super high score. One thing I will say though is that the game can get a little bit long if you play with 4 players and if you pick more challenging holes, but as long as you understand that going into it, it's still a ton of fun. But I definitely recommend checking out Duffers, the golf-inspired deck building game, as it's one of the best deck building games out there. And if you'd like to learn more about this or pick up a copy, there'll be a link in the description below as well. Alright, the next game on the list is Hero Realms, the deck building game. And so again, this is a fantasy-based deck building game where you take on the role of a hero, vying for power, and trying to become the most powerful person and accumulate the most wealth in this kingdom. So this is actually a starter deck for Hero Realms where you can play up to 4 players with this base starter deck. And so it gives you all the cards that you need, but if you like this game, there's a ton of expansions you can add on as well, but they're all really cost effective. So it's not like a collectible card game where you're constantly having to buy boosters to develop the best deck. It gives you everything you need right in this small package. Now, one thing I really like about this game is that it's fast to play and it's easy to learn. Most games are maybe going to take you between 15 to 20 minutes, and the game itself is pretty simple to learn. You'll start off with a base deck of 10 cards that give you some gold and a couple different attacks to attack other players, and each player starts with 50 health. And so you'll go through your turns buying better cards, enhancing your deck in hopes to be the last player standing. What's really neat too is there's a bunch of different factions that you can collect cards from, and each one has kind of an overall theme. So some might be aggressive attackers, others might be healing your character, others might be doing direct damage to other players, and the list goes on and on. And so what's cool is that it has a similar feel to Magic the Gathering, but you don't necessarily need to have specific mana types to buy the cards. Any player can buy any card, you just use gold, so it really gives you a lot of flexibility to mix and match the playstyle of your deck. But like I said, this game is super fun to play, it's easy to learn, it's fast, and it's really addicting, and I think it's accessible to a lot of players. So if you're new to deck building, if you like fantasy, I would definitely recommend Hero Realms, the deck building game. And if you'd like to learn more about this game or pick up a copy, there'll be links in the description below where you can do so. Alright, so the next game on the list is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, the deck building game. And so this is one of my favorite deck building games. I think it's one of the best. And you play as various different Hogwarts students like Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione, and Neville. And if you get some of the expansions, you can play as other characters as well. So basically how this game works is you play as the different Hogwarts students going through each year of the series. And so you'll be facing off against various different Death Eaters that are trying to corrupt key locations from the story. So you start off with a base deck of cards that is unique to each character you happen to be playing as, and then you'll acquire various different spells and items and allies as you play through each year. And so each year there's going to be additional spells added, but you also have to face off all of the Death Eaters from previous years. On top of that, none of the students studied over break, so you start every single year with that initial base set of cards. That can be a little frustrating at times if you had a really awesome deck in a previous year, but at the same time it does keep the game pretty balanced. And each time you play a new year, you get a little bit more experience, a little bit more skilled at playing the game, and it becomes a real challenge in the later years. Because like I said, you're fighting very powerful Death Eaters, one after another, and eventually you take on Voldemort in the final battle of the game. Another thing that I like is that the Death Eaters are always randomized on how they come out. So sometimes you might be facing Death Eaters from year 1 at the same time as you're facing them from year 7. And so each playthrough is a totally new experience in the game. You can choose a base starting character that's different every time, and eventually you reach later years where you learn more skills, you've taken the owls, and now you have more unique abilities for each character. And so again, it's a ton of fun, and I highly recommend playing this game, especially if you're a Harry Potter fan. Another aspect is the game is a cooperative deck building game, so players all work together to defeat the Death Eaters and Voldemort. I think it also does a really great job of scaling, so whether you're playing a 2-player game or a 4-player game, it's just as fun and just as difficult as if you're playing with a different number of players for the game. But overall, I recommend this game. It's one of the best deck builders out there, and if you'd like to pick up a copy, there'll be a link in the description below. Alright, the next game on the list is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle Defense Against the Dark Arts. So this game is similar to the last game, but instead of being a cooperative deck building game, this is a competitive deck building game for 2 players. So as Voldemort is on his way to power, a lot of the students start to form Dumbledore's army to prepare themselves for the ongoing threat of Death Eaters and Voldemort. And so in this game, you basically play through different rounds of students dueling each other, using their powers to be the wizard that wins after dueling for the best of 3 rounds. And so similar to the other Harry Potter deck building game, you start with a base set of cards, but this time you're kind of a generic hero, but you'll start off with an ally that you have and some different abilities you can pick from, and then that base deck of cards. And so as you play, you'll acquire new cards, you'll battle each other, healing yourself, dealing damage to the other wizard, trying to stun them, and be the last wizard standing. And so like I said, it's a best of 3 game, so you might end up playing several rounds in a row to determine who wins the 3 rounds. Routinely, I've seen the game where one player has won 2 rounds in a row, and then the next player comes back to win 3 rounds in a row and end up winning the overall game. And so there's a lot of different strategies that you can choose from, and what's neat with this game too is that between each round, you don't restart your deck from scratch. You carry over your deck that you built up to that point. So maybe you're playing a more long-term strategy that takes a few rounds to kick in, and then like I said, you create this massive comeback when you play the game. So it's a ton of fun. It's got a lot of replay value to the game. It doesn't really take that long to play. I would say anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how many rounds you play, but it's a ton of fun, and I really recommend this game. So if you'd like to learn more about the game or pick up a copy, there'll be a link in the description below. Alright, the next game on the list is The Few and Cursed. And so this is a unique board game mixed with deck building that's based on a comic book series. So one thing you'll notice right off the bat is the artwork is amazing, and the game itself has kind of a unique concept. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where pretty much all of the water in the world has disappeared, and you're playing in a Wild West-esque scenario in the now desert of the Pacific Ocean. And so you play as different curse chasers, which are pretty much bounty hunters that are taking on evil demons that now plague the land. And so the game has a lot of deck building elements, but also some light RPG elements as well, where as you play, you have the ability to upgrade your character's health, increase how much ammunition they can hold, and building a better deck at the same time. And so the game has a bunch of different modes. There's a cooperative mode, a competitive mode, and even a solo mode, and they're all a ton of fun. You also explore the map, trying to get ancient artifacts, take on demons, and there's various different quests you can play as well to earn more grit or victory points to win the game. Most games take around 45 minutes to an hour to play, but like I said, each game is a new experience as there's a bunch of different playable characters you can choose from. There's a variety of gameplay modes, like I mentioned, a bunch of different strategies you can use to win and earn grit, and the list goes on and on. So if you want a cool deck building game combined with a board game, I highly recommend The Few and Cursed. And if you'd like to learn more about it or pick up a copy, there'll be a link in the description below. Alright, the next game on the list is Aeons End. And so this is a unique deck building game where you take on the role as various heroes fighting for humanity's last surviving colony. And so evil monsters called the Nameless have virtually wiped out humanity, and you play as one of the few survivors with magical abilities trying to defend the last human colony, Gravehold. And so this deck building game features a lot of unique mechanics, which make it one of the best deck building games out there. And so to start off, you can play as a bunch of different characters, which all have their own unique play styles and abilities when you start the game. And you'll face off against a giant monster that is your nemesis for the game. And so another unique aspect of the game is that you'll acquire new cards to build your deck, but unlike most deck building games, where when you need to draw cards and you don't have any left, you'll shuffle your deck back in, and now it's a little bit better based on the cards you buy. In this game, you don't actually reshuffle your deck. So after every single turn, once you've played your cards, you'll strategically place them back in your discard pile. And then when it is time to shuffle like you normally would in deck building games, you simply flip over the discard pile, and that becomes your new draw pile. So it has a little bit more of a strategic focus to the game, where how you discard your cards specifically matters, as you can basically prepare for future turns this way. On top of that, another unique element to this game is it has a random turn order. So it's really meant to simulate the chaos of battle between you and the nemesis. And so as you go through, you might have multiple turns in a row before the nemesis attacks, or vice versa, they might have several turns in a row, and then you as the players can take multiple turns to do massive amounts of damage or to heal yourselves after that vicious attack. The game also has a bunch of different nemesis monsters to choose from, and there's a lot of different cards you can use to create the overall store where you buy new cards from. So this can allow you to have a totally different strategy and gameplay experience each time you play through the game, and it's a ton of fun. It's also a cooperative deck building game, so players play together to take on these massive monsters while defending their home city. But overall, I really like this game. It has several expansions as well, so you can check those out too if you really like this base game. But it's definitely one of the best deck building games out there, and I highly recommend it. So if you want to learn more about this game or pick up a copy, there'll be a link in the description below as well. Alright, so the next game on the list is Star Realms. And so this is similar to the Hero Realms deck building game I mentioned earlier, but this one is more of a sci-fi based game. They feature very similar gameplay, but in this case you're building a space armada to be the strongest in the universe. And you need to take out other players that are also building their space armada by acquiring new ships and new star bases and defeating other players. And so similar to Hero Realms, it's a very low cost game to get into. In most cases you can find this starter deck for like 15 bucks or less. But it gives you everything you need for a 2-player game. Similar to Hero Realms as well, it's super easy to learn, it's fast to play. Most games will take you about 15 to 20 minutes to play. But I think if you like simple deck building games that have a high replay value and are a ton of fun, and also like that sci-fi element, Star Realms is a great deck building game to pick up. It's one of my favorite and one of the best deck building games out there. So if you'd like to learn more about this game or pick up a copy, there'll be a link in the description below. Alright, the next game on the list is Dominion. And so in this deck building game, you play as the ruler of a kingdom that's trying to make the best kingdom possible while competing against other rulers fighting over the same land and territory, all while trying to make the best kingdom. And so this is a more simplistic deck building game where players are just vying to get the most victory points as they play. But what's kind of cool with this deck building game is that on your turn you can basically take one action and buy one card. Now what happens as you play, you'll acquire new cards and build your deck more effectively where you can take multiple actions in a turn. Maybe you can play more cards than one. You can buy more than one card, and the list kind of goes on and on. So eventually as you play, you end up playing turns that maybe consist of dozens of actions. You're buying a ton of cards, you're improving your deck, and the list goes on and on. Now what's really neat about this game is you'll start off and you'll set up different piles in the store that you can buy from, but the game itself has over 500 cards to choose from, and so there's a bunch of different piles that can be unique to every single game. So some games you might be playing more of a friendly version where you're not sabotaging other players. Other times you go through and there's cards that will hinder or attack other players, but then they can have cards to defend and counter against that, and it kind of goes on and on. So there's a bunch of different base sets of storefronts that you can choose from, or you can totally customize your own to have a unique experience every time you play. The game itself is also self-contained like many deck building games, so you're not going to need to buy different booster packs or different versions of the game, but there is a ton of different expansions and they can all work together. So the replay value of this game is very high, especially if you're going to buy different expansions for the game as well. I also think the gameplay is pretty simple to learn, so it's very accessible to all player types, even younger players. But again, the strategy can get very complex with the game, so as you really learn and master it, it's definitely enjoyable for new players or experienced players as well. But overall, Dominion is definitely one of the best deck building games out there, and I recommend it. So if you want to learn more about it or pick up a copy, there'll also be a link in the description below where you can do so. Alright, so the last game on the list is Mage Knight. So there's different versions of this game, but this is the Ultimate Edition, and that's definitely the one I would recommend getting, because you get some extra bonus characters you can play as well as 3 different expansions for the game in this same box. Now Mage Knight is a unique deck building game where it combines elements of board games, RPGs, and deck building all into one huge expansive game. Now this game is definitely not a simple game, it's pretty complex. so I don't think I would recommend it for casual players. But basically how the game works is you pick a Mage Knight to start the campaign with, and there's different scenarios you can play through, and you'll go through exploring the map, exploring the board, acquiring new spells, improving your deck, fighting monsters, building an army, and taking on various cities and conquering them to improve your fame and power. And so like I said, it combines RPG elements with deck building, with a board game that you explore. So I think if you're a player of maybe games like Dungeons and Dragons, or you're used to dungeon crawling type board games, but maybe want a little bit more structure to it, or if you like video game RPGs, I think this captures a lot of those same type of elements within the game, but also has that deck building backbone. This is a great game to check out. Like I said, the game is pretty complex. There's different modes to play in, so you can play cooperatively, you can play competitively. There's an expansive solo mode to the game as well. And then most game sessions are going to take an hour to several hours. So like I said, it's probably not for your casual player, but for many people that like RPGs, that like deck building games, they often state this as their favorite deck building game, and it's certainly one of the best deck building games out there. But if you'd like to learn more about this game or pick up a copy for yourself, there'll be a link in the description below. But overall, guys, that wraps up my list of my top 10 best deck building games. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button, as it really helps out the channel. And if there's other deck building games I missed, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for new deck building games to play. Obviously, I haven't played every single deck building game out there, and there's a ton of great ones. So if there's some that I missed or some that you think should be on this list, definitely let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to pick up any copies of these games, there'll be links in the description below where you can do so. And if you guys haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. And if you'd like to help us support the channel, pick out content and more, become a patron of ours at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Patreon. And if you'd like to plug into our live streams and Let's Plays we do on the channel, you can follow us over on Twitch at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Twitch. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.